Just a quick note at the top of this episode, it's very much adults only, trigger warning central. Please listen with caution. And yeah, if you've got kids in the car, this probably isn't an episode for them.
If Spaceman Barry was triggering for you, this one may also have the same triggers.
Okay, on with the show. Hi, Rosabelle. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm really good. Now, we are in person because I've come to visit you in Manchester for the week. And I'd argue we've had a great time. Have you had a great time?
I've had a really good time. It was so nice that you came to see me.
Do you have any feedback on what it's been like to spend a week with me? Because, we used to flat together and stuff. Am I still a good person to hang out with?
Yeah, I think what's good about the fact we know how to be in the same space together is that we don't actually spend that much time together. We're like in the same space, but we're just doing our own thing.
Now, the topic on today's episode, as always, is very American. I'm looking into prison firefighters. So prisoners that they leave the prison and they go out and they fight fires while they finish their sentence. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Ooh, I didn't know that was a thing. So you mean that if you are in prison, you can be a firefighter, so when there's a fire, you leave to go do your job?
Yeah. That's my understanding. So it's basically you signed up, you can volunteer, and instead of being in a jail or a prison, you can go out and fight a fire.
And what's to stop someone from just never coming back to the prison after they've combated the fire? Like run into a burning building and never come out again?
That is a very good question and something I am deeply curious about. I'm David Farrier, a New Zealander accidentally marooned in America, and I want to figure out what makes this country tick. Now, back in January, fires raged in parts of LA, and we did an episode trying to make sense of it all, talking to experts and those who were affected. During the episode, we briefly raised the fact that here in the US, some prisoners find themselves on the front line fighting fires, here in California and in other fire-prone states. I remember finding this out and sort of reacting with horror at the whole idea. Using the prison population to go and do one of the most dangerous things I could imagine, it seemed deeply problematic and troubling to me. Well, since then, I've been talking to one of those prisoners that, while serving their prison sentence for burglary, ended up becoming one of those incarcerated firefighters. So today's episode is about Matthew Hahn, a free man now, and someone who bristles a little bit when people like me come along going, this whole prison firefighter thing seems to be a bad idea. We talk about fighting fires, and then I discover another part of his story, which had him in prison in the first place. And that, I think, is what this episode really ends up being about, but I don't want to do spoilers, so just come along for the ride. So, get ready to ditch that prison cell for a raging forest fire, because this is the Prison Firefighters episode.
Flightless bird, touchdown in America. I'm a flightless bird, touchdown in America.
So you give a spoiler and then said you don't want to give a spoiler.
Yeah, I get it's a bit of a spoiler. It's like something's going to happen, but we don't know what. It's like it's a tease.
Yeah,
it's more of a tease than a spoiler.
A little bit of foreshadowing.
Off topic, but with movies, do you watch trailers not worrying if they're going to get spoiled, or do you avoid trailers altogether? Like, a spoiler's a big thing for you.
I try to not, if I know that I want to see a movie because it's a filmmaker I really want to see, or I've heard they're doing this, I will try to avoid the trailer because
no trailer.
Trailers have gotten so spoily.
Yeah.
It's kind of insane. Like Poor Things, when that was coming out, like we had gone to the movies a bunch right as that was coming out, and the trailer was every single movie. So you just kind of
like shut the ears and just like cover your eyes?
Yeah, going to the bathroom during the trailer.
Yeah, I have a friend that will like exit the cinema during some of the trailers because he's like, I just can't be doing this. I don't want it ruined.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, so look, this episode, it does go somewhere slightly strange. But I have just got back from Manchester.
Welcome back.
Thank you. The time zone.
Safely.
Yeah, back safely.
They let you back in.
So as we're recording this, it's June 23rd, and as I came to fly back to the US, things had kicked off with Iran. So it was the weirdest time to be leaving and to be flying back in here. I came in through Atlanta. Everything was smooth. Haven't been deported yet. Which
you also kind of like threw up middle fingers as you were coming back a little bit.
Yeah, it was funny. Well, I was over there with Roosevelt for a week, which was a really fun week. But just watching America from the outside, I was just sort of reading about everything that was going on with still the ICE raids here in LA, and then the stuff around Iran. And yeah, I was like, I did a bunch of stories just going like, these people suck. Like, this administration sucks.
A lot of people listening are on the same page.
Completely.
And a lot of people following you are on the same page.
Yeah. I think there was this whole attitude of, people talking about, when you come back through customs, people are getting burner phones and they're scrubbing their data. There was that Australian guy that got detained and sent back because he had talked shit about Colombia. He got sent to Australia. But I just sort of thought, if they're going to pull you aside in that customs line, they already know. They're not going to come across any fresh revelations on my phone. So I kind of decided to do the opposite. And
make it very clear.
Make it very clear how I feel and do the opposite of it. And again, I'm a tall white man. Nothing happened. I was fine. But it did feel weird coming back in through customs with everything that's going on here. It was like the weirdest thing.
And I'm sure by the time this comes out, we're going to be 4 steps beyond this.
Oh, and so much will have happened. Like, it's scary to think about.
The amount of stuff changing of like, a week and a half ago was the Epstein file thing.
Yeah,
with
I know.
Elon and Trump fighting.
I mean, that's the thing. So we usually record this about a maximum a week before it comes out. We're doing it longer this time because we've got some live shows coming up, so we have to plan ahead. But we have had that discussion of like, you want to record it like the day of release. That's what it feels like with so much stuff. Because I feel like when we started this podcast, things weren't moving at nearly this pace. But in the last...
Yeah, well, we started during the Biden administration. I feel like this was the pace of things the last time he was president, though.
Yeah, it was chaos.
Where it's just like, here's an onslaught of thing after thing after thing to distract from the previous thing, And
it's that thing where you wake up and it feels like things have just shifted so fundamentally every sleep you have. It's like I'm afraid to go unconscious because it's like I wake up and like, what other fresh hell is going to appear?
Yeah, pretty much.
Positives, I saw my favorite band, Nine Inch Nails, play, and they're kicking off their shows in Europe. I got to see one of their shows. It was great. They're going to be in America in a few months. I would just say if anyone listening to this likes that band, it's the time to see them.
They're paying. They're sponsoring this episode.
Yeah, this is brought to you by Nine Inch Nails. But it was so much fun. The thing that I thought you'd like, Boys Noise, who remixed parts of the Challenger's score, that film, he was there doing a DJ set to open it, and he dropped a couple of Challenger's tracks.
Nice.
I'm a huge fan of that film, and that was just a fun thing to hear in like this big auditorium of people. It was just a cool moment.
I have another tour to plug while we're at it.
This is, do it.
We're going to be in Denver on July 3rd. Doing a live show for this.
We are.
But Dr. Dog is going to be at Red Rocks on July 1st.
The most beautiful music venue probably in America.
And one of my favorite live bands to see. They don't really play shows anymore. They do like, they've been doing Red Rocks every year now.
Oh, so they'll come back for Red Rocks. They'll be like, we'll do
They
this
did like
venue.
a farewell tour a couple of years ago. And yeah, they're doing Red Rocks on the 1st. So anyone in Denver around should go see that show.
I'm incredibly ignorant to their music. What genre? Just give me a ballpark. What's the
They're
vibe?
indie.
Cool.
Yeah.
It's a great name for a band. Big fan.
It's a good name. I took Calvin last year.
Oh, what did he make of them?
It's one of his favorite bands.
Oh.
It was one of the best concerts to go with him, and he was singing like every single song.
Your kids get like, as far as like kids having access to music, they're so lucky having you, because it's like their world is just open to like the most amazing stuff.
Especially that was really fun to experience through Calvin as well.
Because I feel like most parents like are taking their kids and not knocking the Wiggles, but they're taking to like the Wiggles. This is what music is. Whereas your kids are seeing like some of the most epic stuff they could see.
Yeah, Vincent's first concert when he was like 6 months was Andrew Bird playing a Backyard in Silver Lake.
Yeah. Oh my God. Lucky little shit. If you want tickets for our show in Chicago as well, everything's at flightlessbirdpod.com.
That one is July 10th at Park West.
Yes. I also wanted to say the emails we're getting are just getting better and better. And it's always flightlessbirdchat@gmail.com. Just an example, I mentioned sleep training a few episodes ago, and I have, I'd say, 100 really insightful, opinionated emails about the joys and the perils of sleep training. And everyone that writes in, it's very few people that don't write in with really good points and well thought out arguments. And it's a joy to go through the inbox and read what people are writing in.
And respectful arguments.
So respectful. Yeah. It's we get to some of that in the feedback. There's some everyone is respectful even if they're disagreeing. Someone just wrote in before I came in with they'd listened to our Focus on the Family episode, and they'd just been going through a whole lot of books they had in a box, and they found this really good one about premarital sex. I don't want to get too off topic here, but I just really liked it. Sin has always been a destructive effect on a young person, but I believe the sin of premarital sex is especially damaging to the person who engages in it. He or she loses the innocence of youth and sometimes becomes hard and cold as a person. I just love the way that's written. Another James Dobson book. Anyone giving us reviews on Apple or Spotify, that really helps us. So thanks for doing that. And anyone sharing episode links on social media, thank you. That ends the PSA part of this episode. Okay, so prison firefighters. Do you have any thoughts before we get into this interview with Matthew Hahn? Do you have any thoughts on prison firefighters just as a thing?
I'm fairly unaware of them.
Yeah, right.
I mean, I know that there's a lot of contention between forced labor of people in prisons, and that it sometimes gets equated to slavery.
Yeah, that was my thought, because with the LA wildfires, I just saw a bunch of people saying, they make prisoners go out and fight these fires. And I'm like, that seems like whatever you think about people who are incarcerated, making them go and, in my mind, fight the scariest, most dangerous thing you could do, fight a fire. Surely this is going against prisoners' rights or something.
Risk their health, risk their lives.
Yeah. I could think of nothing riskier to do than this, So that was my initial thought. And then I came across this guy, Matthew Hahn, posting he was either on X or Blue Sky, saying, hey, just so you know, there's another side to this. And he started listing some of the things. And that's when I got in touch with him saying, I'd actually like your perspective on all of this.
Should we hear it?
Yeah, that's probably a good place to throw. Chapter 1. The Firefighter. Matt has a shaven head with a big grey beard, one of those big beards that radiates down across your chest.
Well, my name's Matthew Hahn, and I pay my bills as a union electrician. And if you want to call it my side hustle, but my side passion, the stuff I do outside of work, pretty much it relates to meditation, Buddhism, recovery, and kind of the intersection of all of those.
He currently lives in San Jose, California, but spent a lot of his early years in and out of prison. He says these days he tries to give back as much as possible.
I teach in prisons, mostly because a lot of the transformation I made when I was in prison happened because volunteers came inside, so I'm trying to kind of pay it forward. So I feel called to do that sort of work. I'm in recovery, and so I also share meditation and stuff like that with folks in recovery.
I reached out to Matt because during his last 7-year stint in prison, he ended up being one of the prisoners who would go out and fight fires. I'd first heard about this during our LA Fires episode, and I wanted to talk to someone about it firsthand.
I've had a couple of prison terms: burglary, grand theft, possession of stolen property. That's what I was in prison for. But on this term, I spent most of my time before going to fire camp at Folsom State Prison near Sacramento.
Fire camp makes it sound almost fun, like a school camp. But Matt knows people like me look at the idea of incarcerated firefighters with a kind of horror. How could they make prisoners do that?
There's discussion in California about people in prison fighting the fires. I was one of them. I lived in prison. I was a firefighter. There always seems to be a lot of misinformation.
My initial reaction, probably like a lot of people who are online reading headlines about things is sort of shock that, oh God, like the people we're forcing onto the front lines to fight these fires don't have a choice and they're incarcerated. And this seems sort of deeply questionable and unfair. You're someone that's done this. Can you just walk me through your perspective on this a little bit?
I mean, it's complicated, right? Technically speaking, it's a voluntary program for people inside. Voluntary in the sense that nobody's going to get sent to fire camp, which is what they call the places they live, without agreeing to do so or them asking. At the same time, prison conditions aren't great in California. They're dangerous for a number of reasons, like the prison politics and all of that. And so some folks argue, and there's some merit to the argument, that it's not really an option, because it's not really a choice to decide between living behind the walls, where it's dangerous and violent and conditions are terrible, and living outside the walls, having good food, nice visits, going hiking in the morning, getting paid better money. Like, is that a choice or not? That tends to be like kind of the two opposing arguments, and I see merit in both of them. But as someone who was there, who had to live in the conditions in California prisons, it wasn't really. I don't want to say it wasn't a choice, but it seemed like an obvious choice. Why not go live better and be treated more humane?
You're incarcerated. Your day is very regimented. Next second, you're out fighting fires, which is just objectively quite a scary thing to do. I imagine, fire's pretty dangerous. How did you find being thrown into that world?
Well, it felt a heck of a lot less dangerous than living beyond the walls.
It says a lot, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And, as with a lot of things, fear is something that arises in anticipation, but not typically while the thing you were scared of is happening. So as we would approach a fire, ooh, that's a big one. And then when we got there, I don't know, call it machismo, call it adrenaline, some combination of the two. We're like, let's go get this thing, guys. Be safe, but let's go get this thing. There's a little bit of a gung-ho attitude out there. And we felt, honestly, like we were doing something worthwhile. I remember the first big, yeah, I mean, it's redemptive. It's nice to feel like you're being valued, being treated in many ways when we're on the fire, no differently than the other firefighters. And when we leave the fire, the community would be there. They'd be holding signs thanking us. And they weren't distinguishing between the ones who are in prison and the ones who aren't. It was just a thank you. And that felt really good.
Stay tuned for more Flightless Bird. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. Support for Flightless Bird comes from Bombas. Now, I'm just going to say right at the top, I love Bombas. I'm wearing nothing but Bombas socks now. We went to a show last night. Usually I just wear Crocs. I had Bombas socks under my Crocs. It's a new look. And there was a kid there that was a cool young person. They said, those are cool. And I felt cool.
I do think cool socks are important. I like having loud and vibrant socks. So I love Bombas. Bombas makes socks and now slides and seamless essentials that keep up with whatever your summer looks like, whether you're running a marathon or just a few errands or going to a rock concert.
Also, Bombas makes travel socks that can make international flights bearable. I wore my Bombas compression socks on the way back from Manchester because if you're just sitting on a plane, your legs aren't meant to be doing that. Wear some compression socks and Bombas has you covered.
I'm about to hop on a flight and I feel like I should definitely bring my Bombas compression socks.
You absolutely should. The other thing is they don't just feel good, they do good as well. One purchased equals one donated to someone who needs it, and that's pretty great. You can also order Bombas abroad. If you're listening in New Zealand, there's hope for you yet. That's right, along with the US, they now ship internationally to over 200 countries.
Head over to bombas.com and use code BIRD for 20% off your first purchase.
That's BOMBAS.com, code BIRD at checkout. Bombas.com and use code BIRD. Support for Flightless Bird comes from Quince. Now, I'm not big into chasing trends. It's just not something I'm very good at doing.
But I will say you have been looking more stylish since you've started getting clothes from Quince.
Thank you. It's also stuff from Quince. It fits right, it feels good, and it actually lasts. And that's why I keep coming back to Quince. Their lightweight layers and high-quality staples have become essentials for me.
They have the kind of stuff you'll actually wear on repeat. I get stuff and I just cycle through my favorite outfits. I got 5 that I'll wear and rotate throughout the week. They've got breathable flow knit polos, crisp cotton shirts, and comfortable lightweight pants that somehow work for both weekend hangs and dress up dinners.
And they only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices and premium fabrics and finishes. Can't complain about that.
And everything from Quince is half off the cost of similar brands. They work directly with top artisans and cut out the middlemen. So that's where they make up the price. Quince gives you luxury pieces without the markup.
So stick to the staples that last with elevated essentials from Quince. Go to quince.com/bird for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns.
That's QUINCE.com/bird to get free shipping and 365-day returns.
Quince.com/bird.
Yeah, I mean, it was the Hestasita fire in Santa Barbara in 2009.
Seasonal California wildfires that came ahead of schedule are still burning out of control. The latest blaze covers 1,300 acres. Pushed by 70-mile-per-hour winds, the fires made its way through some of Santa Barbara's more affluent neighborhoods, burning dozens of houses, some to their foundations.
Just watching news reports from back then fills me with dread. But Matt was there, driving straight into it.
We knew the fire was big because we were traveling to a different county to go fight it. So you knew it needed resources. But I want to say for the 20 or so miles approaching the fire, the smoke was hovering on the ocean. So we were driving up Highway 1 along the coast in California. And for some reason, the way the atmosphere was acting that day, it had pushed the smoke down almost like fog on the ocean. And when we rounded a particular bend, you could see the fingers of fire leaping up over the top of the mountain. And we're like, oh, this is a big one. And there was a little bit of terror. And it was frantic when we got there because the wind was pushing the fire down the mountain toward the neighborhoods. And so we weren't doing even what we were typically trained to do. We didn't learn to fight fires really in neighborhoods, but that's where they needed us. And so we were in these neighborhoods. The sky was black. The sun was like a red apple or something, and there was fire raining down into the neighborhoods. And I remember taking my first breath of that air, and there's just not as much oxygen in there, and my body went into kind of like a terror response. It wanted to run, and then maybe 10 or 15 minutes into it, it started to get accustomed to it, and then it was just kind of business as usual. But yeah, there was definitely some terror the first time I saw very, very large flames, 50, 100-foot high flames.
While talking to Matt, I realized a lot of my original assumptions were wrong. I'd assumed prisoners were enlisted into the program, forced to fight fires. But it's not exactly like that.
And you're not really chosen. Most people just ask. And so as we move down in security level, usually through good behavior and whatnot, and while we're in prison, you become eligible to move to a level 2 or lower facility. And if you know that you are eligible for fire camp, and most people have researched it already, you ask to go. You have to have 8 years or less left on your sentence. You can't be convicted of serious violence, can't be convicted of sex crimes or arson or have escape attempts. You have to be, the very nature of dropping down in security level, you have to be disciplinary free for a good stretch of time. You can't have any underlying medical conditions that require regular medical treatment or psychiatric treatment because you're out in the middle of nowhere.
I find it good knowing that arsonists aren't sent out into the woods, but I do find myself wondering if once prisoners are free compared to being in a cell, they ever make a run for it, a run for freedom out there in the woods.
People still get in trouble because there often aren't fences. The camp I was at had a road that went right by it, and so family had the opportunity, and this happened, to throw a duffel bag out with liquor and weed and other things that could get people in trouble. And so, yeah, people would, sometimes do that, party a little bit and then get caught and they get sent back to the jail for 90 days or something and then come back to a fire camp after that. But not a ton of trouble, and certainly nothing serious like you see behind the walls. Although there was a guy, this happened a few times, but guys would try to meet their girlfriends in the bushes. And they got caught. And so it wasn't necessarily an escape attempt, but it wasn't out of bounds. And so they sent them back to the prison for a while too. You need to settle down, bud.
Chapter 2, Being Treated Like a Human. As I talked to Matt, I realized that this firefighting program had been really important for him in his rehab. Even just hearing him talk earlier about how rewarding it was to have residents treating him and the actual firefighters the same, thanking him for helping them. As I think about that, I wonder about how Matt views prison in general in America. I'm always sort of shocked that America has, the highest prison population sort of per capita. It seems to be doing sort of a bad job of rehabilitation in general. America sort of loves locking people up. But I'm this liberal idiot who's never been inside a prison. Maybe we need to be locking people up that deserve it. Do you have any sort of broad ideas on how America could do it better or how it's going?
I don't want to act like I have an answer, but I can say that the most transformation I saw happen in prison, myself and others, happened in environments where we were actually treated like humans, where we had some dignity, where a moment from our past wasn't used to define us in every waking moment from there on forward. And those were in those spaces like I talked about where volunteers would come in. And they were in spaces like being in fire camp where you're just a firefighter and you're working for the community, like the redemptive value in that. Everybody wants to feel relevant and valued. And in most prison circumstances, that relevance and value comes from all the wrong people. So how do we transform prisons if we have to have them? How do we transform prisons into places where people can feel relevant and feel valuable and have self-worth or build it back, and get that from people who we should be getting it from? I think there's a lot of people in prisons that probably shouldn't be in prisons at all in the first place. One thing that surprised me was that prisons are full of people that you really wouldn't recognize as belonging in prison were it not for the fact that you saw them in prison. These are a lot of people in there are really feel like average Joes, including people who've been convicted of what we think of as heinous and terrible crimes. It was always a surprising thing for me. So I think if you look to things like, the Norwegian model, where except in the instances of people who have essentially let everyone know that they will have no interest in becoming a different person, people live in humane environments. They're allowed to essentially try to recreate what life might be like on the outside, but on the inside. Give them the opportunity to figure out how to be human, and the only way you can do that is to treat them that way. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know how you transform a prison. I think California's system is around 100K, 110K or something now, 110,000 people. I don't know how you do that for 110,000 people. Places like fire camp are a start, in my opinion, even despite the good arguments to the contrary. They're kind of the vanguard of what we think of when we think of prison labor. But at the same time, they're the one place where people are treated human too. And it's I always get really scared. And it hurts my heart sometimes when I hear of folks who are saying or doing things maybe unwittingly, and they're on my side. They're always have the best intentions. But I worry about the program getting shut down, because I know that what happens when programs like that get shut down is they don't go home. They just go back to the prison, And so how do we have more environments like fire camps, honestly, in prisons where people can get treated more humane, and probably even better environments like the ones they have in Norway and Sweden?
Yes, how the fuck do you expect someone to become a better human if you're not even treating them like a human during that process, right? You've got no fucking chance.
Yeah, if you ever want insight into the way guards think about humans, there's some interesting books you could find in the world, essentially training guides for prison guards, training guides for correctional officers, and you find out how they learn to contend with prisoners, inmates. And one of the things they learn is that sympathy and compassion are dangerous. They're told to be wary of compassion. In fact, I've had to do a couple of trainings myself as preparation for going back into prison that's provided by various departments of corrections. And part of that training, there's always a few slides on beware of compassion, beware of empathy. These are dangerous things to feel. Remember, the other thing they say is, remember, they're probably lying to you, and they're definitely trying to manipulate you. I'm sorry, if folks are if that's the presumption about people, how do you expect them to act any different than the way they were before they came in? And if not worse, because some people weren't actually lying all the time, or manipulating all the time, or doing things that would warrant that sort of treatment. And so a lot of times people just come out worse. It's a terrible narrative to digest.
While Matt says it's complicated, for him, being an incarcerated firefighter was a good thing, an opportunity to do something that mattered. Mentally, for him, that was huge. And it also came with some other added benefits.
The other thing that we got compensated with was early release, so I went home a year and a half early because of going there.
And this is where the story takes a bit of a turn. Because technically, fighting fires or not, Matt should have been in prison for life for what he had done. And I'd never be talking to him like this. But clearly, that's not what happened. Chapter 3. Life is always stranger than fiction. One thing that I'll always appreciate about life is that it's way stranger, way weirder than anything that happens in the movies. There are things that happen in real life that no one would buy if they were sitting in a cinema watching it play out on screen. Critics would bemoan its bad writing and far-fetched plot, saying, no way, that would never happen. But of course, real life is scattered with things that screenwriters could never come up with. I always think of the 42-year-old computer expert in Germany who went online in 2001 to find someone he could eat for dinner. That person ended up being a 43-year-old engineer who agreed to come over and be, slowly eaten. Alive at first, and then killed and nibbled on some more by the cannibal. He ended up in a freezer next to a pizza. Two men going online to find a very specific thing. One who wanted to eat a person, another who wanted to be eaten. A match made in, not heaven exactly, a match made here on planet Earth, where anything and everything tends to happen. Now, Matt's story of how he got to be in prison and how he got out has nothing to do with cannibalism or the internet, but it is one of those stories that seems stranger than fiction to me, maybe to you as well. Chapter 4. The Safe. Back in the 90s, Matt had a passion for stealing. That's a little unfair. He had a passion for drugs, and the stealing helped fund that habit. But as tends to happen, he got caught a few times and sent to prison.
There's California's 3 strikes law, and because I'd gone to prison once, it meant that because of my convictions, also for burglary and theft and stuff, if I got any felony ever again, I would do 25 years to life for each one.
In short, when Matt got released in 2001, he knew that he had already been convicted on 2 serious offenses. And because his crimes all happened in California, that state's 3 strikes law meant if he got arrested again, he'd be going away for a long time. Pretty much for life. And that was a good motivator to stay clean and sober. No drugs, no drinking, no stealing. And things were good for a few years. He was doing well, until he wasn't.
After some life tragedy and inability to cope and my decision to relapse on drugs, I came home from prison and I kind of went ripping and roaring again. I was stealing again. I was burglarizing again.
He ripped and he roared his way around California. He knew this life and he was straight back into it. Did he have the whole 3 strikes thing in the back of his mind? Of course, but that was where it was, in the back of his mind. He had other things to think about. And then one day, there was the safe. Looking back, he says it all seems a bit like fate. The front door of this house was ajar, almost welcoming him in.
I had an accomplice, but he's unnamed to this day. So we stole this safe from a house, brought it home, and I kind of waited for the sun to come up because I knew it was going to be noisy and I didn't want to wake the neighbors trying to open it. And I just cut open a corner of the door. I wasn't a safe cracker. I wasn't a professional. I cut open a corner of the door and I started to pull the things out.
When you steal a safe, you imagine the contents will have some kind of value, a reason to be locked away. Money or diamonds, rings or gold. This wasn't the case that day.
The more jarring part of this story is that the first thing I pulled out was a diaper, and there was a handful of diapers inside the safe. And when I first pulled it out, I thought, okay, maybe maybe there's something that's breakable and he's hiding it in a diaper. I don't know. I'm just trying to, reason with strange evidence in front of me.
There was nothing hidden inside those diapers. They were soiled diapers, and Matt got a very, very bad feeling about this.
There was not really anything else in the safe to speak of, so I didn't think much about it until later when I took a digital camera card an SD card, whatever it would have been back then. I'm not sure it was called an SD. And I put it in my computer tower. And I remember I was just smoking a cigarette, and I thought I'd stumbled upon somebody's like homemade, nudes or something. Yeah. Right? That's what I thought I'd stumbled on. But they were like kind of streaming across the screen as they did back in the day as like little thumbnails. And then I clicked on one, and it was odd, but I wasn't entirely sure what I was looking at. And it was only after I went through a few and I realized what I was looking at, that it was an adult and it was a child. And honestly, there was some nausea, but there was also just shock. Like I couldn't believe, I know stuff like this happens. It's never happened to me. I know it's happened to people I know, but I guess it's just one of these, like, how did this end up in my hands? Like, how did I come to this? Like, it's sitting on my computer in my studio apartment, and I'm looking at it, and how did this happen, and why me?
I've spent a lot of time on the internet and have been to some pretty grimy places, but I've been lucky enough to see nothing like this. But then I guess Matt wasn't on the internet. He was on somebody's SD card that he'd found locked in a safe, next to some soiled diapers that suddenly seemed so much worse. He sat there, stunned.
But at the same time, like, I knew I'm going to do something about it. I knew without doubt that I was going to do something about it. The question was like, how? How am I going to do it? How can I protect myself from the process? But I knew that I needed to get into the police.
Because unlike most horrific things you might see online, Matt knew exactly who the photos belonged to. The man whose house Matt had stolen the safe from. The guy that was in the photos. You see this thing, you know in your mind, I need to dob this person in because they're doing awful things. Like, what was the process of figuring out how to do it, and how long did it kind of take? And how long did you wrestle with that for?
There wasn't much of a process, honestly. I didn't research anything. That was the morning, and I waited for sundown. I called the guy that I'd stolen the safe with because he had left, and I told him I'd call him when I'd open the safe. He asked me what was inside. I said, why don't you just come over? We'll talk about it. I showed him what I'd found in the safe, and he's like, no, just throw this away. I don't want anything to do with this. You got to get rid of this. I said, well, you think I wanted something to do with this? No, of course I didn't. And that's when I made the promise to him. I'm like, look, I'm going to do something with this tonight. And if I ever get caught with it, nobody will ever know who you are. Obviously, I couldn't go into the police department and go, hey, I've been, ripping through the neighborhood. Here I am. But I found this. That didn't seem like the wisest choice. So yeah, there wasn't much of a process. Sometimes when there's like a dilemma like that, I didn't really need to think too much about it other than, what do I need to wipe clean from fingerprints? How do I want to type the note that I'm putting in there to make sure it doesn't get traced back to me? Stuff like that. But that was just, a matter of minutes figuring out how to make sure that happens. I think I bought a new ream of paper so that I hadn't touched them. We wiped everything clean, wore gloves, that sort of thing. So I just went and turned it in that night. I mailed it into the police, put it in a mailbox.
The man, the safe owner, the pedophile, the rapist, John Robbie Robinson Aitken, whatever you want to call him, was arrested and taken into custody. The police had their anonymous evidence, and they jumped on it quickly. Matt felt a huge sense of relief, but it was short-lived. 2 months later, he was caught and arrested for another burglary in another place. His 3 strikes nightmare had come true.
There was a certain kind of like relinquishing, realizing that I don't want to do this anymore. Like I'm tired of lying. I'm tired of cheating. I'm tired of stealing.
Chapter 5, Strike number 3.
I knew the police department. I'd been on parole in that town, so I kind of knew them pretty well. And they were essentially shaming me when I got arrested, not without justification. And maybe in one of the worst instances of like showing the ace up my sleeve, because of the shame, because of what was going on, I said, well, at least I gave you Aitken, and that was the name of the guy who'd been arrested. And so they came to know that I was the one who had done that burglary.
A year goes by, and Matthew is awaiting his day in court. It's fair to say he was in a pretty bad headspace.
I'm in the county jail. I'm facing 16 felonies, so 400 years to life, 25 for each one. I was just in a lot of pain, man. Like, I wanted to die. Like, I was planning on committing suicide if I got to preliminary hearings and it looked like I was definitely getting life.
But while he was in jail, a problem had arisen with the other case. Because the evidence in that case, the SD card, the photos, was all stolen property from an anonymous source, and cracks were appearing. And somehow, his comment to the police about being the anonymous thief had reached the DA.
And I get visited by the district attorney who's prosecuting that other guy. And she basically tells me that there's a chance the photos that I found could get thrown out as evidence because they were obtained illegally, and that they needed to prove somehow that that it wasn't the police that were involved in that burglary, right? And so essentially asked me to go on the record saying that I'd stolen the safe and whether I'd be willing to testify to the fact that I'd stolen the safe.
This created a problem for Matt.
And of course, then I couldn't go to trial because there'd now be in my own case, because there'd now be a recording of me saying I was stealing. I was hoping to get to a jury trial and just get convicted of possession of stolen property and hope a judge would never give me a life sentence for possession of stolen property. That was my hope. You know, maybe I can get 10 or 20 years for possession of stolen property. And that's what my whole hope was.
Stay tuned for more Flightless Bird. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. Flightless Bird is brought to you by BetterHelp. Now, I don't know what your friends are going through, Rob, but it feels like most of my friends in New Zealand and the States are involved in like a bunch of workplace stress at the moment, like very annoying managers and colleagues that are difficult to work with. Everyone seems to be worried about work stuff at the moment.
I mean, I relate to annoying colleagues.
I don't know what you're talking about. But workplace stress is now one of the top causes of declining mental health, with over 61% of the global workforce experiencing higher than normal levels of stress, which explains why a lot of my friends are complaining. And while the holiday is really great, it isn't a long-term solution to stress. Don't forget that therapy can help you navigate whatever challenges the workday, or any day for that matter, might be bringing you.
Yeah, I think just being able to talk to someone about these issues, it doesn't always solve the problem, but getting it off your chest can relieve so much stress. We both find it very valuable to be able to have an outlet to kind of express these feelings and these stresses.
I was talking with Roseville actually about how every project I do, whether it's like something I'm writing for WebWorm or a documentary, there's always at some point where I get so stressed like a toddler, like angry. Like, why is this happening? And one thing that therapy has taught me is that you don't have to let those feelings overwhelm you, and you can just step back from them. It's not going to get rid of your horribly annoying boss or colleague, but it is going to make you much more sane in the process of dealing with that and being able to feel better in that moment. So that's why therapy for me is so important.
With over 30,000 therapists, BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform, having served over 5 million people globally. And it works with an App Store rating of 4.9 out of 5 based on over 1.7 million client reviews.
It's also really convenient. You can join a session with a therapist at the click of a button, helping you fit therapy around whatever you're doing in your own busy life. Plus, you can switch therapists at any time. And I think that's another really great feature.
Yeah, you don't have to be trapped.
Yeah, exactly. I hate being trapped. I should probably see a therapist about that.
As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/bird.
That's betterhelp.com/bird. What that prosecutor wanted was for him to admit on record to this theft. There would be no arguing his way out of strike 3 if he was admitting in great detail to stealing a safe. I guess he made his decision for the same reasons he handed the evidence in the first place. He agreed to testify because it would mean John Robbie Robertson Aitken wouldn't get away with what he had done in those photos, or get to do it again.
This district attorney came and visited me, and I agreed. And I agreed to testify. And so it was really kind of a moment of letting go of the wheel, for me. Like, I'm like, the fate of my life is now in the hands of other people. It was the right thing to do. I felt like it was the right thing to do. I don't regret doing it. I did the recording with the district attorney that day. And that was enough. That was enough to scare him into accepting a plea bargain. It was one of those things where they realized, okay, so these motions we filed to have evidence thrown out, there's now sufficient evidence to make sure that those motions don't work. And I think that was part of the point, right? Was like, now he realizes he has to go to trial, and he's going to have to go to trial with those photographs as the evidence. And so he ended up accepting a plea bargain of 30 years.
Chapter 6. Matt awaits his fate. Thanks to Matthew agreeing to testify, Aitken went away for 30 years, which for many doesn't seem like long enough. Matt, who is facing life at this point, has some thoughts.
And sometimes you hear people say, like, why do people with sex offenses or sex convictions, why are they always getting less time, right? And the simple answer to that, I think, is often it's evidentiary. A lot of the time when there's a case where someone suspects someone of molestation or something, it might be a he, she. There might not be hard evidence. There might not be video evidence or photographic evidence. And so the district attorney's thinking is likely, you know what, let's go get 3 or 4 years out of him and get him on the sex registry. That's usually how a district attorney would think about it, because they don't think they'll win in trial. They don't think they have a good chance of winning at trial. Yeah, and then we get a ton of time for people who are repeat offenders, and people like me who have, drug tangent, theft crimes. We tend to have a high recidivism rate, which means we have long criminal records, which means it's easy to tack on all that extra stuff like 3 strikes laws or repeat offender stuff. Whereas violent crime sometimes isn't that way. It's like a one-off a lot of the time. And so it's often a first-time offense. So a guy could get less time for an attempted murder than someone who stole like I did.
Thanks to California's 3-strike rule, Matt was essentially expecting to be spending the rest of his life in prison. But the DA who'd prosecuted Aitken ended up speaking to a journalist about the case, a journalist who was keen to point out the absurdity of it all, of how crazy it would be if the man who'd discovered these horrific crimes ended up serving more time in prison than him.
And he ran a story in the paper a few times, essentially saying, why is Matthew Hahn facing more time than the man he discovered doing a terrible thing to a child? And that eventually pushed the district attorney to offer me a plea bargain. I took a plea bargain of 14 years.
What could have been life ended up being 14 years, all because of that safe. And he ended up being released after 7. He was well behaved. It was during that sentence that he volunteered for the fire team. And during those 7 years, he focused on finally changing his life, taking advice, listening to others.
And what ended up happening is I started to meet people in recovery and in meditation groups that were just giving of themselves for no reason other than to just give of themselves. I started to run into kind people that treated me human, that gave me a shot, that didn't judge me for why I was there. I had family that was like super supportive of me the whole time I was gone, that loved me no matter what. I had even that lawyer who gave me that advice about making this my home. Like, I took that advice really seriously. I asked myself, what do I want to do? And in the beginning, it was, I want to read every book I've ever told myself I wanted to read, but never did. And I had time to do it, the long ones like War and Peace, whatever. Like, I've got to do that. And it started out simple, like really, in many ways, it started out with simple, almost superficial stuff. Like, I want to read a book. I want to finish college. I want to learn to weld. Like, those were things I was thinking about, but it really ended up turning into like a massive, like internal inside job, and none of it would have happened if it wasn't for the love and support of so many other people. I'm here standing on the shoulders of friends and loved ones. I'm here because there were men who were sentenced to many, many decades or many life sentences in prison who had transformed before I got there, and who mentored me and showed me how to do time in a way that wasn't that could make me come out on the other end a better man. It's shocking sometimes. I tell folks, I'm like, I was mentored by murderers.
As I said earlier, Matt ended up getting out in just 7 years. For a time, he and Aitken were in the same prison. They'd see each other sometimes. They don't anymore. Chapter 7. Looking back at that night. Matt says discovering that safe 20 years ago is surreal to think about. It put a rapist in prison, it saved a kid from God knows what else. And it meant Matt avoided life in prison, that 3rd strike unstruck. And he got to get his life together. As we wrap up our conversation, it strikes me that there are so many things about that night in 2005 that make no logical sense. Things that are far stranger far weirder than anything that could happen in the movies. And Matt thinks a lot about this too.
One thing about that night that I stole it that's kind of interesting is that I was on the property and walked by the front door to this place where the safe was, and it was dark and there was nothing happening. And as I left the property, it's like 2 a.m, mind you, as I left the property, the door was wide open and the lights were on. So whoever was home had woken up while I was there and stepped out of their house to walk to the house next door. And so as I'm leaving, I walk by this open door. Of course, normally I would just run, right? Because someone's awake. I'm doing a burglary and someone just woke up. But when I looked through that door, I saw the safe sitting on the floor of the bedroom. And we went and got it. And I found out later, grand jury hearings and all that he had left the house, gone into his parents' house, and watched us steal the safe from the window of the kitchen. And he said he was watching his life get walked away in that safe. And so in terms of like serendipity, and I'm not a God-fearing kind of guy, right? But like this couldn't have happened any other way. You know, if I had smoked one more cigarette or one less cigarette, if I had hit one more red light or one less red light or one more green light or whatever it is, I'd be doing the rest of my life in prison. That safe would never have been discovered. Stolen. I didn't discover it, but stolen. And things would have been very different for him, for that little girl, for me, if it hadn't happened exactly the way it did. And that is a baffling thing to ponder sometimes.
So, that was a lot.
Yeah, it was a lot.
Goes without saying. I mean, 2 things jumped out at me. Primarily that revelation where he started that prison firefighters volunteer for the role.
Yeah.
And he found it this really positive experience of like, he got to feel like he was worthy. He enjoyed doing it. It took time off his sentence. Obviously, there's people that would probably disagree or have a different experience. But for him, he was like, this was a really good thing for me to do. And I just never thought of that perspective when I was originally thinking like, oh God, this is horrible that firefighters are doing this.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot more context to it. The fact that they're treated more humanely, they're housed differently, they're in different areas, and the fact that the prison that he would normally be in is more dangerous than fighting the fire.
Totally. Like he'd rather be out.
Yeah.
Also, you spoke to Rosabel's fear or curiosity about why don't people just escape? Like, it's generally not the thing that's done because they're minimum security by then and close to the end of their sentence. But that was my thought. It's like, let's take all these prisoners, let's release them in the woods. And I just pictured like everyone like dropping the hose and just running. But no, they want to fight the fires. They want to help. They want to do good for society. And I thought that was pretty special.
Yeah, I mean, and it's interesting the fact about prisoners that are actually changing when they're treated humanely.
Completely.
And how much of a difference that makes when you're not treated like the guards are taught to treat them.
And I thought of your dad as well in that, because we've talked to him before about like his work going into prisons. And it is, I think he had said a similar thing where, yeah, just talk to people like they're people.
Yeah.
Like shouldn't be
Make
that shocking
bad choices,
to do.
but that's
completely
it.
So yeah, I thought that was really refreshing. As for the second part of the story, which just that whole concept of this discovery that gives you this information, this awful thing that then ends up through a series of events, meaning that that person is caught and put away, and also that can be used so your sentence is shortened. It was just what are the chances of him burglarizing on that night in that house, and that's what was in there, and even the decision of like,
yeah, it was admirable that he, well,
did he turn the guy in? It was
it wasn't.
No, it was. No, I think it was admirable because my first thought was, and it was my question to him, like, was there a thought where you just, I didn't see that, and because the last thing you want to do is contact the police about you doing a burglary, especially when you're on this whole 3 strike situation.
It was admirable that he decided to testify that he had stolen it.
Yeah, just the way that went in this direction, that direction, and in this direction, and ended up with almost the perfect result. was for as perfect as he could be in that situation.
Yeah,
was
so
pretty
perfect. Let's
amazing.
maybe not use the word perfect. to
No,
describe
perfect's the wrong
that.
word. But I mean, getting the guy caught and convicted,
Right. Correct. Yeah.
thumbs up.
Yeah.
Very into this. But yeah, he just sort of blew my mind on many levels. And I think he, after his experiences being incarcerated, the experiences firefighting, and just looking back at testifying in that case, I think he is just an entirely different person than he was, 20, 30 years ago.
Well, and it was great to hear the mentors and people that he found within the system that helped rehabilitate him.
I mean, it's that great line, like, I was mentored by murderers.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. Like, those were the people that helped him and brought him out. Like, that's kind of incredible.
Yeah, they weren't disposable humans that we just discard and throw in this prison.
Completely. Oh, and the fact that for a period of time, he was also serving in the same institution as the pedophile, that was just, again, like, how does any of this stuff happen? Like, how is it real?
Yeah.
That case I alluded to at the top of this about the cannibal finding someone to eat online. Had you heard that story before?
I don't think so. Was it you?
No, I wasn't the cannibal. No, it always blown my mind. It was in Germany, and there was basically someone, all he wanted to do was to eat someone. That was his whole thing.
This is separate from
separate from the cannibal story that we did a long time ago. Yeah, another cannibal. There are multiple cannibals out there. And yeah, he was like, best way to find a live victim is to just jump online and put the query out there. And he found someone that their main wish was to be eaten. Like, that was their main thing.
Did he go away for that?
It's a really good question. He did get, I believe he did. Let me check.
I mean, that's an interesting philosophical question.
No,
though,
it is.
If the guy voluntarily allowed for it to happen.
He wanted it to happen. But then you've still got that case of he killed a man.
Right.
That's the thing. So this was in 2001. He was arrested in 2002. And in 2004, he was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 8 years and 6 months in
8 years only
prison. Ate his penis first. That was the first thing he ate.
Naturally. I guess there was probably a pretty solid trail of evidence that the man online wanted to be eaten.
Yeah, there was. Absolutely. And I think that's why it was that contributed to the manslaughter as opposed to the murder.
Right.
And he was also, very willingly taking part in that. But it is a strange thing to think about.
Well, I mean, it's an assisted suicide almost.
This is jumping ahead, and it's a topic we're going to get into in another episode. But I was talking with Rosabelle in Manchester about cryonics and how this art of freezing people so that one day you'll be resurrected. And she had thought, and I think a lot of people thought this, that when you were frozen in cryonics, you were alive when you got frozen. And I was thinking about it, I was like, right, it's like, are you alive? But no, you're dead when you're frozen. Because if you froze someone while they're alive, again, that's murder.
Yeah, but there are places around the country where you can do assisted suicide.
That's exactly what Roosevelt said. So yeah, why not be assisted? What's the difference between assisted suicide and we're going to freeze you as you're dying?
You have like a terminal illness and you are at the point where you are considering assisted suicide. Of like, cool, freeze me, and hopefully when you unfreeze me, there's a cure for this.
Completely. Exactly what Roosevelt said, and that's what I want to look into now. You and Rosabelle, you think alike, I got to say, which is a good thing. She's incredibly smart. So yeah, Matthew has a website where he talks about prison rehab and other topics. MatthewHahn.com, MatthewHahn.com. And he's Hahn Scratch on social media. He's one of those people that ever since I've followed him, he's always just tweeting out like wisdom. And I'm like, you know what you're talking about.
How old is he now?
He is in his 40s, I believe. But he was just such a pleasure to talk to. And yeah, he's just had a lot of crazy shit happen to him and has somehow like kept his head together through all of it.
Sounds like he's lived a long life.
Also, just that image of like, I don't want to linger on this, but just that whole image of like, you're going to crack a safe, you think this is going to be the payload, there's dirty nappies, and you're like, God, no. And then everything from there, like, you open a safe and there's like an SD card, you know it's not going to be good.
Yeah.
All right. Feedback. A lot of feedback to the LA protests episode. Many people raising the fact that people have been taking Look, allegedly, I need to actually get to the facts on this, taking leaf blowers along. Have you heard this?
To blow the tear gas smoke
back?
away? Yeah. I did see a video of someone, they had some contraption that they would stick on top of the tear gas and it would like diffuse it,
basically
essentially.
diffuse it, right? Yeah, so they'd run up. I mean, it was very satisfying to watch.
Yeah.
Like basically cap this canister and just completely stop it from dispersing.
Yeah.
Probably more sensible than whatever they were doing, more sensible than like leaf blowing it back. But it was the first time in my life where I thought maybe, just maybe, this is the use of a leaf blower that I can get behind. You know, there's something like kind of baller about that.
Did you also hear, apparently there's a bunch of tow truck drivers in LA that are following ICE around?
I heard about this, but I couldn't verify it.
I have not verified it either, but I've seen it a few places. Well, because they're unmarked vehicles and they're normally parking illegally. So when they go to make their stops and run out, they just tow them.
Dear God, I hope it's true.
Yeah.
Like any pushback against that shit is like, so satisfying to watch.
That's a movie too. These renegade
Really,
truck drivers.
It really is. But it's like, no, there's something very, not to get distracted again, but the things that jumped out at me while I was in Manchester watching the footage and kind of made my blood boil again was there was an ICE agent with a silencer on the end of a rifle. That's terrifying. There was a guy who, and excuse me if my gun lingo is wrong, but he basically like cocked his gun as he was out, like, which is like loading into the chamber. Very threatening thing to do. And then there was another guy that pulled a pistol and was like holding it like he was in a movie like this.
Well, I mean, you missed this while you were in Manchester too, but there was the shootings in Michigan.
Oh, that's right.
The shootings in Minnesota where someone was impersonating cops.
The Democratic senator, right?
Lawmaker.
Democratic
lawmakers that were targeted. I mean, which makes it even scarier that like they're covering their faces and their identity and not willing to say who they are.
Completely. Also, that story seems there's so much crap going on.
Yeah, that seems forever ago.
And that's I should know everything about that. Like it should be a giant story. It feels like it just sort of flitted away.
Yeah, this will be two and a half weeks ago from when this is released.
And you're right. Like that is this whole idea of having masked, unidentifiable people on the streets. Like, what is there to stop any? I mean, there are already cases of like people just dressing up and like playing cop out there. Yeah, I'm surprised it's allowed. But then, am I in this country? I don't know. Andy wrote in. I was listening while walking my dog around the quiet Scottish rural town that I live in, peaceful with the sun splitting the sky.
I like the idea of someone in Scotland listening to
Same.
the podcast.
I thought that's so nice. It's so nice, right? Yet in my ears is a barrage of noise, loud revving of engines, shouts and screams of protesters. Being from Glasgow, I'm well accustomed to loud crowds and potentially violent gatherings. We experience it yearly with football and our own religious hell. But I've never heard the noise that was coming through my headphones like that of the recording you were broadcasting. The energy of the protesters to protect some level of human rights, morality and democracy is amazing, but it pales in comparison to the iron fist of the US government and the direction it is sent in by the current president. This episode is just a reminder that I'm glad I do not live in the United States. It's too volatile. A country with the potential to be the pinnacle of diversity and multiculturalism is time and time again sent back into the dark ages of racism and horror by those who run it. It's horrific that cruelty like this can be seen as being so ordinary. So thank you for that, Andy in beautiful Glasgow. Jamie wrote in, and speaking about people from different perspectives being clear and laying out their argument well, I think this speaks to that. Jamie does start with a little precursor. To be clear, I'm not a Trump supporter, and to this day I still can't believe that he has been elected twice. But then she went on to say, actually she or he, Jamie, I'm not sure, I was deeply offended by the treatment of the National Guardsmen and women by the LA protesters and a few comments made by you, David. As someone who served in the army as an enlisted soldier, I feel for the folks that were deployed, who were sent away from friends and family on a ridiculous mission. While there are a few dummies who probably loved the whole thing, I can assure you that the majority of the mature men and women in uniform were horrified to be put in that position. For those who have never served, you just know that when you get sworn in, you take an oath to follow orders. all orders. You don't have the luxury to pick and choose. You don't get to call in sick or quit your job. If you fail to follow orders or not do your duties, you can be court-martialed and imprisoned. While this may seem like those who choose to serve sell their souls, a lot of us see no other options. The military offers sign-on bonuses, college tuition, housing, food, etc. When you're faced with the choice between serving a few years in the military or with never being able to scrape your way out of poverty, signing all your rights away for a few years doesn't seem all that bad. And yeah, I thought that was a really interesting position. My initial, my pushback is as someone who isn't in this position, is always at what point are you being told to do something where you go, no, I'm not going to do that. There has to be a point where just because you're just following orders in history hasn't always worked out that well. And I think that is also something I just always feel deep in my guts. But they do raise a good point. Also, these people, and it's the National Guard member, the former National Guard member we interviewed the other week, he made the point that when you are sent somewhere, you're just suddenly sent there. You don't have time to look at all this is maybe a bad example, this particular case, but you don't always get to look at the politics of the situation. You're just sent to do your job. But at some point with these ICE agents, when this is going on for months, I'm like, come on,
Right. I mean, I don't think we can also interchange what ICE is doing with what the National Guard was doing.
Oh, 100%.
In LA especially.
So 100%. I just did that without even thinking. Yeah, 100%. I just think at some point when you're doing this ICE, you have to sort of clock and go maybe taking orders isn't what I...
Well,
I don't organizations.
think ICE is a military position either, where they're ordered and it's their job to do that, but it's not you're not risking imprisonment, and you're not risking imprisonment for
that's the other thing with
order.
ICE, right? Yeah.
I think that they're just like a police officer.
Yeah.
And at that point, you can quit, which obviously is a much more weighted decision as well. But
100%.
If it's do what they're doing or quit, you would hope a lot of people would choose quitting over that.
100%. And you're right, there is that distinction. My brain just sort of suddenly lumped everyone in the same place. But yeah, again, then I guess the National Guard also have that choice of depending on what you're called to do against American citizens, is when do you sort of think to stop doing that as well? But consequences are worse for them. And also they're bringing in people young who need the money, and it does give them a job. And you need money in America. But I appreciated Jamie's words there. Jade wrote in on our Scientology episode from a while back now. I was born and raised in Clearwater, Florida, and I'm not a Scientologist. I sometimes forget how strange and dark the cult is because it's just an average part of my life. A couple of quirks I thought you might be interested in from an outsider's perspective. When job hunting in Clearwater, you must be careful that you're not accidentally applying to a front for Scientology. It's happened to almost every young adult I know who's ventured into the job market at some point in the area, and I even got so far as to have a phone interview with one of them. They seem like average businesses, and when you look them up on Glassdoor or other reference sites, the reviews are always good and harmless. That's because typically they have members of the cult write glowing reviews that make them seem normal. She says they also have a private school in town called Clearwater Academy International, that does pre-K to high school. I was unaware that they had their own school. Again, it's never advertised that they're Scientologists, which is amazing to me. So yeah, watch out if you're applying for Clearwater Academy International. Her mother's next door neighbors are Scientologists, and years ago they signed her up for Scientology without her permission. It took her months and months to get off their lists. I think she may be classified as a suppressive person now, which is fine with her. We all once got a magazine in the mail as Clearwater residents for Scientology that basically said, this is terrifying, we're all around you. We are your dentists, your doctors, your neighbors, your firemen. Oh,
Clearwater, Florida.
Clearwater, Florida. What a place. She offered us a tour if we ever end up there, which I think is very kind, and I'd be very tempted. From the Blockbuster episode, I just thought this was a nice story. This is Heather. About 17 years ago, I moved from a small town to Oak Ridge. And when I moved, I got not only a Blockbuster membership, but also a Hollywood video membership.
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward 6 months, I'm fresh out of a relationship and see a very attractive man working at Hollywood Video. I rented some movies and went on my way. About 2 weeks later, I find one of the DVDs still in my DVD player, The Love Guru. Have you seen The Love Guru, Rob?
Is that Austin Powers? Do you have Michael Myers?
Yeah. It's not good.
No, doesn't he play an Indian man?
Yeah.
Yeah. All
right. She found the DVD still in her player weeks after it was due. I'd returned an empty box. I take myself down to the video store to return it and probably spend all my money on late fees. I was prepared. I walk in and it was the hot guy working.
The Love Guru.
the Love Guru. While he's looking everything up in the system, he starts chatting to me about my hoodie that I was wearing, which was a Slipknot hoodie. I love Slipknot, so I'm a big supporter of that. And we bond over one of their records. He says, if you let me take you out to coffee, this is one of the smoothest lines of all time. If you let me take you out to coffee, I'll make those late fees disappear.
That should be our next Flightless Bird shirt.
Fast forward 16 years, 1 kid and 2 dogs later, I'm forever grateful that I left the Love Guru in my DVD player. Thought that was really beautiful.
I mean, Michael Myers working his magic.
And just finally about that sperm donation epi, just some feedback from Susan. From someone who was conceived via sperm donation, I had some thoughts. Lack of regulations, and there are many, is in large part due to the following. Both sperm and egg donation are regulated or overseen by the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. They consider it reproductive tissue rather than something that will become a full human being because it's not innervated, doesn't have nerves. Never heard that word before. The Health Resources and Services Administration, on the other hand, regulates and oversees innervated things such as organs for transplants. Then there's the Administration of Children and Families, which oversees foster care and adoption. All 3 of these are divisions of the Department of Health and Human Services, but I think products that create the genetic makeup of a human should maybe not be overseen and regulated by the FDA. And I just found that so interesting that the Food Drug Administration administers
crazy.
Eggs and sperm, because I think of that as like drugs and food.
Yeah.
Some people. And that's a good place to end. Also, she just mentioned another amazing thing. Her donor family is at 50 dibblings, she calls them, donor siblings. And counting. Just thinking outside the box here, but how about an agency that focuses on human beings rather than products should run this whole thing?
Yeah, probably a good idea.
Yeah, I thought that was a fun little fact. FDA. Holy shit. Any parting thoughts, Robert?
July 3rd, July 10th, Denver and Chicago.
Yeah, flightlessbirdpod.com has tickets for both those shows. Can't wait to see you there. If I have said anything stupid this week, it's because I am currently in the Manchester time zone. When I went to bed at midnight last night, I looked and it was 8 a.m. in Manchester. And so right now I'm meant to be asleep. But Rob, it's good to be here with you.
Yeah, welcome back.
Good to be here. I miss you, Rosabelle, but it's good to be here with you, Rob. And we'll see you next week.
See you next week.